This is Carrie Offstein-Rosenthal, and this is the podcast Held.
My love, you left me in the summertime, and all the leaves were on their trees, and all the flowers still smell so sweet.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk about the birth. Angie, how did you know when you were ready to give birth?
I knew the timing was right. And one night I was watching TV and just remember getting a sharp pain, thinking it was just no more than stomach pains from food or whatever. And then it would go away. And then hours later, it would come back. And so it did occur to me that perhaps something was happening, but, again, I didn't really know exactly what to look for. And this went on all through the night. I did tell my parents what was happening. I ended up crawling into their bed early the next morning after not being able to sleep that night. One of them, I believe, started timing them, and we went to the hospital. My sister was left there at the house. I believe they left her a note just saying everything's okay, but we had to take Angie somewhere and just go ahead and go to school, catch the bus. That's to the best of my memory. I think she was told that I had an ovarian cyst at birth.
How were you feeling when that was going on? You went and got in bed with your parents. Why did you do that?
I was in a lot of pain. The overwhelming emotion I remember is just sheer joy and excitement to be able to have that chapter over.
Were you scared at all of childbirth?
I wasn't. I was pretty stern about my feelings, I believe, to not remember or feel anything. Obviously, I felt things at the beginning, but in the end, they gave me Twilight, and I really don't remember much about being in pain. Although, to this day, I can very distinctly remember, although they tell me I was super doped up on Twilight, and there's no way that I could remember, but I did, and I do remember hearing a baby cry. And I remember thinking to myself, that's the last thing I wanted to hear. Seriously? That's the last thing, aside from the gender, that's the last thing I really wanted to hear. I sort of remember the room, how it was set up. I certainly remember where I recovered. Both had windows. I was alone in both rooms. I remember which way the bed was facing. I remember the smell of the linens in the hospital. In fact, I can go into any hospital and smell that smell, and it takes me back.
Did you ever see the baby, or other than that cry, did you see the baby? Did you know if it was a boy or a girl?
That was one of many deals that I made with my parents and the doctors. I did not want to remember the birth. I did not want to know the gender of that baby. I was afraid that I would never be able to not see that baby in my head some way, somehow. I was able to just go to sleep at night thinking, oh yeah, there's a baby out there somewhere. But, it was just this concept. It was a genderless, faceless baby. So it was easy to just sort of move on. And that was my plan, even as, a young teenager.
Do you remember waking up?
I don't really remember that, but I do remember that I was about to be given the Twilight. And I remember my mother standing there, and I remember sobbing, just the happiest tears that just flowed and flowed and flowed. And I just kept saying, oh my God, this is almost over. This is almost over. This is almost over. And I remember her crying along with me and saying, I know, it's almost over.
I want to introduce you now to Reese and Gary, who are Angie's parents. Reese and Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Describe Angie as a teenager.
She, as a little girl, she only aimed to please. All of a sudden, she grows up into a teenager, and that all changed very quickly. I assume hormones were raging, and she became very distant from us. Mm-hmm. And I was very, very concerned because I thought, I've never seen such a change. It was like there was an anger about her towards us. Mm-hmm. And so thankful that it didn't extend to her friends. She had friends always, and her grades were slipping, but not to the point where I thought she was going to flunk out of school, but I was concerned. And she made it clear that she disliked us. And I kept thinking, I can't wait for these teenage years to be over. Because I really thought that was basically what it was.
Part of this was very normal, and the other part, the rebellion part, may have been normal too. You don't have any experience as a parent, so you just have to kind of go with it and pick things up as they come along.
Walk us through how each of you found out about Angie's pregnancy.
Angie said that we discussed the whole thing together, her attempt on her life and the fact that she thought or knew she was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember that. I only remember her coming into our bedroom one night saying she was pregnant. And in her memory, and I would go by her, that she at the same time told me that she made an attempt on her life, went to Walgreens, bought these sleeping pills. And I can't believe it, but it's true. You do block. You totally block. So I must have blocked it instantly almost, because I never told Gary that. Now, I don't know if I didn't tell him at that time because I didn't want him to be as upset as I was and I was protecting him, or if I just totally blocked it. And months ago, it came up again between me and Angie. And I said, Angie, I can't believe it. I blocked the whole thing. I mean, I really did. But for some reason, when she told me about that part of it, about taking an attempt on her life, something sounded vaguely familiar. So I was confused in my own mind, like, why does this sound familiar? So Gary just found out like a few days ago. So it's still very fresh with him. So I did end up telling him.
Let me step back a second. Tell me about her conversation with you regarding being pregnant.
I remember as she said, I don't remember she said she thought she was pregnant or she knew she was pregnant. That part I don't remember. But I immediately said, you got to get to a doctor, an OB. We need to take care, figure this out. Mm-hmm. And I suspected way months ago that she might have been pregnant, but when I asked her if they were having sex, because I was going to put her on birth control pills, it would have been too late, of course, after the fact. But in the very beginning, when she and Mike, their relationship took off, I wanted her, thought she should be on the pill if that was the case, and she said, "No, we're not doing that." It wasn't comfortable, I guess, for her to own up to the fact that they were having sex. Mm-hmm. Then when she came to me that she thought she was pregnant, I wasn't shocked. I think that was one of your questions. I was not shocked because I wondered. She said they weren't having, the whole thing was shrouded in secrecy. It was just a crazy time. And I said to myself, oh my God, so they had been having sex. Okay, obviously, if she thinks she's pregnant, but it was too far. I knew it would have been too far to terminate that pregnancy for an abortion.
And when she told you about it, had you physically thought she was pregnant at any point?
No, because at the time, as you know, she's tall, she's lanky, she was a kid, so she's not going to show as quickly. And the style then were the leggings and the real loose skirts. I didn't really see it until I mean, I kept looking for it. If you want to know, I really was checking her out.
You were looking because you thought she was sexually active?
It was one of those things. I didn't want to be that mother who checks out. Do I see a is she using? Are there the same amount of tampons in the box as there were last month?
Yeah.
But yet, I needed to know if she was in trouble, and yet at the same time, I thought if she was pregnant at that time, it's not going to go away by itself. She would know she would need to come to me. And I was hoping that she knew that she could come to me and trust me with that information. But, as you well know, probably from her interview, in order to come for help, that would have meant she had to tell me. And she couldn't tell anybody. She was just crippled by fear and shame. Her answer to not telling anyone, of course, was to take her life. I mean, it's horrible. The entire thing was terrible, but the good news is, and I told Angie this the other day, I said, you are here. We can touch you, we can hug you, we can talk, we can laugh, we can cry. You're here. And that's how I look at it. It could have had a much worse ending.
So, Gary, how did you find out about the baby?
Now, Reese told me. I was not present. I really didn't have any idea. I was probably preoccupied with business, which was booming at the time, and probably didn't pay attention to signs, which I may not have noticed anyway. Mm-hmm. The sad part about the whole thing is that we've always been there for both kids, and, that she didn't feel close enough, despite the fear, to confide in us. And Reese was a counselor at a reproductive health service.
It was an abortion clinic.
Right. Obviously has experience in dealing with this. And I guess when I think back, she'd have been a perfect person to speak with about it. And
about ending the pregnancy.
Correct. And she, I guess, was, as Reese said, so fearful that we would find out, that her grandparents would find out, that Tracy would find out, that she, kept it to herself. And I just learned about the attempted, I guess you'd call it suicide, was just really shocked with that. So, as Reese said, she's a very loving, caring, wonderful woman who we love deeply, and I'm leaving it at that.
So when you found out about her being pregnant, it sounds like you weren't really surprised because you suspected in your heart of hearts that she was sexually active.
Right. I wasn't shocked. Okay. I was, tell you the truth, more than anything, I was hurt. Not shocked and not even angry that she was pregnant, but I thought, like Gary said, we had the kind of relationship where she could bring anything to me, and to Gary too, but he was, like he said, in the throes of business. It was, he was totally focused on business. So I was more not shocked. I was surprised that she hadn't told me sooner because I had suspected sooner, but no, it wasn't shocking. I was more hurt, as I said, that she didn't come to me with this. She was pro-choice. I'm pro-choice.
Yeah,
here he is.
So what went through your mind? Okay, so you figure out that you don't know how far along because she hasn't gone to a doctor. So what's the next step when that all went down?
We went to the doctor, the OB. She went to mine, mm-hmm. And he said, and he looked at me and he said, Reese, she is almost 7 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And it was either 6 or 7. And I wasn't shocked. I just shook my head because I immediately knew, like I suspected before, that if she was pregnant, it was going to be too far for an abortion. She wasn't on vitamins or anything, as most people were at the time when you suspect you're pregnant. And I thought to myself, I hope this baby's healthy, but let's put it behind us and move on.
After she came to you about this and after you went to the doctor, did you continue to have conversations about it? I mean, was there ever a discussion that she would keep the baby?
No, there was never really, should we keep it, should we not keep it? I mean, it just would not have been logical given her age. It wouldn't have been a wise decision for Angie.
So how then did you decide what to do next?
I contacted a friend of mine who's an attorney, and I just said to him, he was Jewish, and I said to him, what can we do about this? He said, but I'll do it. I'll take care of it. It'll be handled privately. Nobody will know about it.
Talking about adoption.
Yes. And the closest place where we can do this is Memphis. So Reese and I said, that's fine. Let's go ahead and we'll proceed. And then it basically led to the fact that she had Zach. We didn't know anything further other than that we had to go to Memphis. She had to go to court, sign all kinds of documents, and that was the end of that chapter.
And when she was going through that, did you feel that it was painful for her to be signing that, or that she just wanted to get it behind her?
To me, she just wanted it done, over with, move on.
Were either of you disappointed, not in that she didn't tell you, but in Angie in any way for having gotten into this predicament? Were you upset about it?
We were just beside ourselves because at that time it was a bit more shameful. But I told Angie the other day, I said, Angie, it was 1,000 times more shameful and painful for you than the way we would have ever seen it. It would have been like, okay, damn, okay, but let's move on and take care of it. We're here for you. I mean, that's what I would have said. When she ended up telling us and knowing she was going to put this up for adoption, I was like Angie. I turned out like, okay, I don't want to hear about it anymore. Carrie, I didn't even know what the sex of the baby was. I didn't know if she had a boy or girl. And Gary did want to know, so he asked the doctor. And I didn't know for 10 years, so I was sort of like Angie in that way. I was like her. I just stuck my head in the sand. I don't want to know. I don't want to feel. I just want to move on.
After Zach was born, the doctor came out and told us, and he started to leave. And he's a friend of mine and poker playing buddy of mine. I said to him, I need to know what the sex of the baby was. He said, it's against the law for me to tell you. He said, I can't disclose that because of the Jewish Family Services and the adoption. He said, but if I said it was a boy, and he continued from there, I said, thanks. That was it. So I knew, and Reese never asked, nor did Angie.
I
And
didn't want to know.
Kept it to myself, saying, it needs to come out at some point in time, but hopefully he's healthy, happy, adopted by a good family. And
did you know he was healthy?
Yes, very healthy, and no issues whatsoever of any kind.
And because you knew it was a boy, Gary, did you often wonder about him as time went by? Had you, it sounds like Angie and Reese were sort of like, let's put this away, but you had that information. Did you ever wonder about him?
Yes. And I wondered, I like sports a lot, how it would have been, to go through the various ages with, going to events and doing things and so on and so forth. And then, honestly, after a period of time, it just kind of faded away. And every so often, Reese would bring it up. I wonder what happened and all this and so on and so forth. And then it just kind of, I guess, took a back seat because we figured, okay, it's not going to come up. Angie will not or did not discuss it, and we just left it alone until this surfaced.
Whatever Angie wanted, the three of us wanted the same thing. Get it behind us, move on. Put it up for adoption is what we said, and, just move on. Angie, you have school to look forward to, and college.
Would you say that you and Angie are alike in a lot of ways?
In that way.
In that way.
We were very much in that way.
Can you describe for me the sort of months after, there was 3 months after Angie told you all, and then before she gave birth? What were those days and nights like? Did she come to you and say, I'm having pain?
They were much better in terms of getting along. She wasn't as angry, I think, because my opinion is because she needed us. Mm-hmm. She knew she needed us, and I think she was very thankful and appreciative that we helped her through this rather than to say you're on your own, find your own doctor, find your own adoption. We would never have done that.
Right.
But I do think that there was a closeness that we hadn't felt in many, many years with Angie during that time. Once she delivered, little by little, it became strained again, our relationship.
She had relief by the fact that we together, the three of us, agreed to do what was then the right thing.
One of the things she said to me, and you reiterated it, is that she felt just an enormous amount of shame. And she didn't want anyone to think badly of her, but also she didn't want anyone to go through what she was going through. Michael, you, her grandparents, her cousins, her sister. Does that surprise you that she felt so much? I mean, because let's face it, a lot of her peers were likely also sexually active.
Oh, I'm sure they were. But I really felt, yes, I was more than surprised. I was sickened that it was more important to her what other people thought than it was to live. And she would rather end her life than to, it still seems very surreal.
Was it a difficult thing for you to keep what you were going through a secret? Did you tell your mother, for example? Did you tell a best friend? I know that, Gary, you must have told someone to get help, but other than that, did you all confide in anybody?
The only person I never told my parents. I never told Gary's parents. I told none of my friends, my good friends, and one of my friends, Carrie, I don't know if this came up in conversation, but one of my friends was Michael's mother. We were friends, and we would go out and have drinks and have, wine together. And I never
You didn't know that?
told her.
I think I knew it, but I thought it was later.
And she said to me when this whole thing came about, out in the open, she said, Reese, all those times we were together and we would have a little too much wine, you never even hinted that Michael and Angie, what? And she just could. And I said, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for being in shock. You should be in shock. I was so, my whole brain, the whole thing was about protecting Angie. And I mean, she did not want anyone to know.
So just to be clear, Lois is Michael's mother. We referred to her as Granny. And I just want to bring her back for a little second and just ask you, Granny, do you have anything that you feel like you'd like to share about this story?
I think Angie should feel good because it was raised, in a nice family. I think that gives her a peace of mind. I mean, can you imagine? I feel for her, what she went through for all these years, not knowing. Couldn't be easy. I'm just glad this all happened. Everybody's very happy about everything. I had lunch with her parents a few weeks ago. It was so much fun. Here we are related. We've been friends a long time. I don't know how she did what she did. I mean, 16 years old. Boy, she went through a lot.
Yeah.
Her parents and her. I wish I could have been there just to support her because it wasn't an easy decision, I'm sure.
Well, Rissy, talk a little bit about why it was so important to keep this secret, even from your close friends, even from Mike's mother.
When we were driving home from Memphis, she said to me, thank you so much to both of us. She said, thank you so very, very much for everything that you've done for me to get through this. She said, but I don't ever want to discuss it again, and I don't ever want anyone to know. And I said, Angie, okay, I mean, those were her wishes. Although I did tell my sister, because we're very close, and I had to tell someone.
I would have, I can't, that's what I'm saying. I would have had to tell somebody.
I did tell, and I couldn't even discuss it as much with Gary as I would have liked to, because he was still in the throes of business, and that's kind of what his head was. And anyway, so I did tell Betsy, my sister. And then when she went off to school, that is when I told her, because I didn't want there to be that big of a secret, looming over us. It's her sister.
I want to introduce you now to Angie's sister, Tracy. Welcome to the podcast, Tracy. So in hindsight, do you remember anything about the year Angie was pregnant?
I do, but I didn't know at the time. Like, I remember like an incident happening where somebody asked, it was either somebody, it must have been my freshman year in high school, Angie's senior. I remember someone saying something like Angie's pregnant or because she's pregnant, right? When she had said that to me, I must have gone home and asked my mom, and my mom told me she had a cyst on her ovary. And maybe that's why people thought she was pregnant. And so I either knew that at the time, or maybe I came back to tell this person again that no, she had a cyst on her ovary.
Did you remember ever thinking that she looked pregnant or?
No, never. I mean, at that age, of course,
you wouldn't think, right?
Like those sisters that would get undressed and try for each other or use the bathroom at the same time, that type of thing. So it probably never really would have occurred.
You guys were more private.
Yes.
Do you have any recollection in hindsight of the night of the birth?
No memory of that.
When did you find out that Angie gave birth? What's the story behind that?
I was 18. I guess it was probably summer because I was getting ready to go to college. Mom and I went to lunch at Ruby Tuesdays. I remember eating my favorite salad. And I remember Mom saying, I don't want there to be any secrets. Isn't that funny? I remember her saying that. I don't want there to be secrets in the family. You should know. When, Angie was 16, she got pregnant. And I remember that thinking right after she said that, I remember thinking, she was 16, she had, an abortion. And then my mom continued and said she had the baby and gave it up for adoption. I was like, oh, wait, what? It was shocking. I definitely remember feeling that, of course, and sadness for my sister. That was definitely top. Just knowing that she went through that, like that stuck in my head. And then I didn't tell anybody for 30 years probably.
Did you tell your husband?
Yes, I told Ben. Probably I remember we were moved in together, so we were probably engaged. I told like a therapist, I'm sure, but I've never, told friends or anybody. I was told it's a secret.
Did you ever talk to Angie about it after that?
So I never talked about it, never mentioned it to Angie until, and it was such a prevalent thing on my mind as well, because just knowing that, and it's just, odd. And that she doesn't know I know. And I'm like, okay, I got to say something. So it was probably, I want to say maybe 10 years ago.
10 years ago, you were 40.
I think it probably was around there. We went to St. Louis together on a girls' trip to visit our great aunt. And so we were in St. Louis together. And the other caveat to this is that my mom and I have talked about it before.
Talked about it kind of on the regular, but not in front of Angie.
Right.
And what kinds of things did you say when you talked about it with your mom?
Well, my mom knew the sex. Yeah, she remembered the birthday too. So I knew, it's just so weird. We would just talk about, one of the big things was that my parents or my mom especially was afraid that Randy didn't know. And that was a huge thing. I said, so when I confronted Angie, I know what triggered me talking to her about it was a letter I had found. I guess we had gone through some old stuff from my parents' house, and it was an old paper, like an essay that Angie had written. It was like her nightmare. And she described pains and having this baby, and I'm reading it. And of course I'm starting to cry. I'm like, oh my God, this is what happened. I can't remember exactly what was in that letter.
She wrote something in high school.
I just remember it being about a dream.
It was supposed to be fictional or a dream.
Yes.
And she wrote that, and then you read it, and then you decided you wanted to talk to her about it.
Yeah, so I was very emotional about it. I don't know if she'll remember this, but we were in the car together. Angie and I, we love each other to death, but we don't say it every time at all. So we were in the car together, and I said to her, I'm thinking to myself, I gotta say something. And I said, I love you, right? And she's like, oh my God, yes, of course. She's like, I love you too. And then I don't remember if we said anything else, but then I think it was that night we had a cocktail, and I said, or maybe it was when we got back to the lobby. And I said, Angie, I've been holding on to this, and I just want to just tell you that I'm sorry. And I know you had a baby. Her reaction, and it's funny, I don't remember if she probably doesn't remember saying this either, but I'm sure to ease I was, starting to tear up. I'm sure to ease it, she was like, oh, don't worry, it's okay. I think I said something about like, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. So she said, oh my God, Tracy had plenty of help or something like that. So I am to myself, I'm thinking, well, I know she didn't tell mom. So she definitely told like Krista, or someone. And then I don't think we really ever talked about it. I was afraid. I didn't know if she wanted to talk about it. And it's fine. She didn't tell me or whatever, but like, we haven't talked about it and, ever. I guess I didn't want to, my sister and I never had these like in-depth conversations about stuff. So to bring that up, it was like big enough. I don't want to overstep my boundaries, so to speak, anymore. And I don't want to, upset her. If she doesn't want to talk about it, she doesn't have to talk about it. But yes, of course, I have a gazillion questions in my head. Okay, so back to our conversation with Angie in the lobby. I said, does Randy know? She, of course, said, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. And so that is what the next day when I was talking to my mom on the phone with my mom, I said, Randy knows. And I remember hearing my mom go, oh my God.
So looking back on it, just your 13-year-old self, any changes in her, not just physically, but we said physically, not really, but emotionally. Do you remember her pulling away? Do you remember her being particularly maybe mean or distant or anything?
Yes, the first two things. And I never really put two and two together, until recently with my own therapist. She's like, well, see, that's why, I guess it was around that time. And I do remember my sister and mom fighting a lot. I think it was around probably the same time. Mm-hmm. It must have been.
And were you worried about it? Like,
yes. Oh yeah. It was the only time I could, but they've never been like cohesive. Yeah. So that, so I guess arguing, I just always thought was a part of them. Mm-hmm. But I remember plenty of times my mom like slamming her door or Angie slamming hers. And it was the only time I could yell, shut up, because no one could hear me because, they were yelling so much. And you weren't allowed to say shut up. We weren't that close. I mean, she's always been someone I can count on and call, and always, I know that. But we weren't like close like we are now. And I guess that does come with age too, as well. But, like when I was in college or she was in college, it was just totally parallel lives. But I think ever since she got married and I got married, it's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us. I want to get back now to Gary and Reese and talk about the night of the birth where we left off. But what do you remember of the night of the birth?
I just remember waiting in a waiting room. That's all. And we had no phones, no cell phones at the time. And we were just in the waiting room. Maybe went.
Where was Tracy? How did that all work out?
I think she would probably spent the night at a friend's. I really don't remember that. I just remember making a phone call to my sister that she gave birth. And Angie's doing well, and the baby's okay, healthy.
Do you remember her being in pain? Do you remember her being scared? Do you remember, because it's a big thing to give birth. I mean, it's a terrifying experience.
I don't remember her crying. I just remember her. Do you?
No, not at all.
No, she was just, oh, that hurt. Oh, that hurt. That like that. She never said, oh, I'm so scared. I don't remember her saying that. No, she might have said it, but I don't remember her saying it.
She was just anxious to get it over with.
Yeah. And so was that what was going through your mind? Like, let this be a healthy, safe experience and get it over with.
The best scenario was that they were both healthy, and they both were.
We were also concerned about what effect this would have on her after the birth.
For sure.
Okay. And we had no idea. Obviously, you don't have experience with it. So we just had to play it, one day at a time and hope that everything with her was fine after that.
Well, I wanted her to see a therapist, but she just couldn't, because then she's talking about it. And then I think that if she felt she were talking about it, then that meant she couldn't forget about it. And I know she wanted to forget it.
I mean, that's what she said to me, certainly.
Okay.
That's exactly how she said you begged her to get help.
So I was in a begging mode. It won't help anyway. And I said, it would.
Yeah. What was going through your mind when she was having the baby?
Like I said, we're glad it's going to be over with. And, we need to take the next step. And we were already talking about, how long it would be before we could leave go to Memphis together, sign all the papers, get back and get life back to some semblance of normalcy.
Do you have any regrets about the choices you made? Would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I totally, of course, I have regrets. As her mother, I felt like when I suspected she could have been pregnant, well, I kept telling myself, that can't be. I'm being a paranoid, one of those hysterical mothers, but I should have followed my instincts. We should have had professional counseling.
We forgot one thing. Didn't you call her pediatrician?
Yes, that's right. I called him and I suspected. I said, I think Angie's pregnant. And he said, what makes you think so? And I said, well, this doesn't go over well with the doctor who has a scientific mind. But I said, well, I don't know. I feel it. He said, well, I'm going to need more than that. And I said, I get it, but I don't know. She's acting really weird. And then when I asked her if they were having sex, she became way too defensive. I said, the signs are there. And he basically, without saying it, I think he too put it off that I was a, paranoid mother.
His exact words he told me were that you sometimes just have to trust your children. Okay?
You're right. He did. And I'm thinking,
you're saying something that I say to myself all the time, which is you have to trust your gut. You have to trust your gut. And it's interesting because you trusted her, but not your own gut.
Right. I should have pursued that. Then I called the pediatrician and said, after we had seen the OB, and he confirmed the pregnancy, and I said, guess what? She's whatever pregnant she was. And he went, oh.
So what were your concerns, if any, about Angie giving up the baby? I mean, Gary, you had said that you were worried about her mental health afterwards, and Reese, you as well. Did you have any other concerns, like that she would think about it or that she couldn't put it behind her or anything like that?
Well, yes. I mean, I was always concerned for years. Like, I wonder if she thinks about this on a daily basis. I wonder if it is eating her up. I wonder, but I couldn't ask her because I was afraid, another regret. I was afraid that it would throw her into some kind of a tizzy, because she made it very clear she didn't want to discuss it again. She never wanted to hear about it again. Of course, that was the teenage Angie talking.
Sure.
I don't know. It's been very, I wish I had brought it up more and say, okay, Angie, it's really going to be cathartic for us to discuss this. And I didn't, because I was so afraid about her mental health, like Gary said, that the whole thing was a mess. It was really a mess. When she got married to Randy, and Randy, thank God, has been, the way we see it, he's been outstanding for her. He's one of the best part of her life. He's the best, one of the best. He's really outstanding.
Like the Rock.
And he's great balance for her.
Thinking about what should have happened, we really should have gone to see a therapist, Reese and I, and just told him or her what the issue was and how it is now, and how do we get her to speak about it. Is there a way to handle this that you would suggest where it could be drawn out from her so she doesn't have to go through this by herself? We should have done that. We didn't. Our mistake.
It was a big mistake. It was. I did see a therapist. Gary said he just wanted to be me and a therapist. And I told the therapist, we started off with the two of us. And then I ended up continuing to go to him a few more times. But I wasn't getting anything out of it. I wasn't feeling better about it. He had no particular suggestions. And as time went on, really, we just forgot about it. Of course, times we think about Zach,
Like every birthday, you would think.
Well,
about
for sure, on his birthday, I would always tell him happy birthday to myself. When I'm driving, happy birthday, whoever you are. But yes, I always wondered. I wonder if he's married now. I wonder if he has children. I wonder, as the years went on. But yeah, I thought it was the best choice. We always felt it was the best choice to give this baby up for adoption.
So right after she gave birth, how long was it in your recollection until she went back to school?
What I think happened is that I think she did go back to school and then took her out of school for a couple of days to make this trip. So maybe we just said, I don't remember what we told school.
I think we said she had flu or something like that.
Or,
whatever it was.
We told my parents that she had a cyst on her ovary and she was in the hospital. Basically what I think Angie told her friends.
Do you remember the conversation about keeping the adoption open or closed?
I had a conversation with the social worker, and she said something about at what point, if her birth child wants to reach out to her, how long can they be closed, the records? And I think I said 30, because I'm 30 years old, because I felt she would be mature enough or old enough because I don't know, it was tough. I didn't like being put in that, I didn't want to ask her. She's a kid still, she's a child. And although it's her child, I didn't think she was mature enough, Gary, and I felt she wasn't mature enough to make that decision. Although, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because I am going to ask Angie what would she have said forever and ever. But the thing is, what Rashki told me wouldn't have mattered, because after a certain age, and I think it was 30, those records can be opened.
Yes, I can answer one of those questions for you, which is that Angie said that she absolutely thought that it was closed and it would never, she would never hear or see any information about this ever again. Like, she did not think that was a remote possibility. She said she may have made that up, but in her mind,
that maybe is what she thought, or maybe what we thought too.
But going back to your question, I think the misinterpretation is of the word closed. I think we just said closed and didn't attach a time period to it. So she probably assumed that closed means it's closed permanently.
Right. Knowing Angie, did it surprise you that she felt so strongly about keeping this a secret?
No, not at all. I would have been shocked if she would have said, hey, let's open this up.
Did it surprise you that she continued to keep it a secret throughout adulthood?
I wasn't surprised because of the whole way it was handled. I often wondered if she had ever told any of her close girlfriends. We never asked.
What do you think the effects of keeping the secret, what effects did that have on Angie long term?
I think it devoured her. I think in a negative, it was so unnecessary, but that was then, okay. But I think that she became intense. And I think a lot of the intensity within her was because holding onto this for so long. It was, the entire thing was handled in the most awful of ways, starting with Angie keeping it a secret, with Gary and I not forcing something to acknowledge this.
There's an old saying, bad memories lurk in your mind forever. And when you think about that, you don't know what's going through her mind, and you don't know what she may see a baby and go home and cry for 2 hours. We didn't know.
I wondered.
And she never spoke about it. And, it's just those unsaid things that you have no clue. And, you hate to see your daughter suffer through all these things. Like I said, I feel bad because maybe we did a poor job of parenting, but we thought we had an open relationship always, and that either one of them could come to us and just say, hey, here's the situation. Let's talk about it. That's all it would have taken. But she couldn't do it.
But it's not that I see it. It wasn't that she didn't want to talk to her. She couldn't. She was paralyzed, crippled with this horrible image of herself that she would let people down or disappoint people, or people would point their finger and talk about her. I don't know. I mean, it was terrible.
She said that her 16-year-old brain, it was almost like it couldn't take it. So it just sort of put it away and kept putting it away until she couldn't put it away.
She couldn't deal with it. She couldn't.
Yeah. And it's funny because now when we were talking about it, and I share this with you just because I thought it was really powerful, she was so hard on herself today for how she handled it then. And I was like, Angie, you were 16 years old. Like, you did the best you could. You did the best you could. And by the way, as a parent, I can say, you guys did the best you could. You only can do what you know what to do. At the time,
don't know what to do. There are times when you say, I don't know what to do. Or you can be super smart in one area, super smart in another area, and not smart. And then something comes along and you say, I can't handle this. I don't know what. Like you just said, you don't know what to do. And I had said to her something about, like her teenage brain. I wonder if she hadn't at some point then, because she thought the best way to handle it was to do away with herself. And today she's like, how could I have thought that? And I said to her a few months ago, I said, you were a kid. And I was like yelling at her. I said, what? You were a kid. You couldn't talk about it. You were a kid. You were in trouble and you couldn't, there was no, you couldn't face reality.
And Angie, how hard were those 9 months?
Well, the first 7 months when it was just me, the scale is immeasurable, just immeasurable, the pain.
Was it anxiety? Was it fear?
It was sadness. It was fear. It was desperation. It was, as we've discussed, this intense shame. It was wanting to just not be in this life, wanting to be someone else, wanting this to have just all been a horrible nightmare, all of those feelings.
And what were your feelings like after you gave birth?
After I gave birth and I was in the recovery room and I was alone, a number of adults came in, not my parents. My parents were not allowed in. And they had papers with them. And they said, are you under coercion? Do you want to keep this baby? Feel free to tell us the truth with your parents not in the room. I remember in my head, I don't recall what actually came out of my mouth, but I recall in my head saying, give me those papers as fast as you fucking can and leave. They gave me the papers. They knew that I did not want to know the sex of the baby. So they covered up any pertinent information about the gender. They did say to me, Angie, this is a hard decision, but it's yours and yours only to make. Do you want to hold this baby? This could be the first and only time that you ever get to hold this baby. And there was a thread in me that it was desperate to just see that it was healthy and that I hadn't screwed anything up. But I also knew my end goal, which was to forget it all. And if I had held that child, I could have never forgotten the weight of that baby in my arms or the sight of that child. And I don't think that I could have I don't think that I could have slept at night seeing that baby. So no, I said, please, I do not want to hold this baby. I'd like to sign the papers and move on with my life.
And did you cry or were you matter of fact?
I think I was pretty matter of fact. The overwhelming feeling was excitement to get back to my friends and not worry about hiding my growing self and not worrying about keeping a secret and just being a teenager and enjoying my teenage years and my senior year. And, I just was excited to be a kid again. My real overwhelming feeling was, get me out of the hospital, get me back to school, and let's start life again.
Okay, so after you had the baby, can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Mike? Do you remember seeing him after the baby was born? Did you ever, at the time, I know you were trying to protect him, but when you were signing those papers, for example, can a mother just sign away a baby without the father's knowledge? Was there any law around that? Like, how was that positioned? Did they say, do you want to tell the dad? Like, how did they handle that?
My parents definitely put the pressure on to tell the father, who, as I think I've mentioned, was the very last soul on the face of the earth that I wanted to have to know about this. Throughout, actually, my parents found out at 7 months. So I guess those last couple months, when I was asked by doctors and nurses and whoever else I spoke with, perhaps social workers, if I knew who the father was, I always lied and said no. My parents did know. Once the baby was born, again, they asked me to tell him, in which I refused. I signed legal papers and the birth certificate under oath in front of a judge in a Memphis courthouse, completely by myself. After the birth, once I signed those papers, the baby was no longer my responsibility.
They took the baby from the hospital.
Jewish Family Services took the baby from the hospital. Someone flew the baby to Memphis. I don't know how much longer, but say a week or two later, me and my parents drove just for overnight. We drove to Memphis, where I was to sign the papers. I know that we really discussed that I was going to be in front of a judge and I was taking an oath. And how did I feel about that? And I believe that I would have rather have gone to jail for the rest of my life for perjury than to have had the birth father find out. I went into the judge's chambers by myself. My parents weren't allowed in. I took an oath and I swore under that oath that I did not know who the father was, and I attested to that on several documents. I left the judge's chambers. My parents and I left, went back home, and that was the finale. That was it. There was no more loose hanging threads. It was all tied up in a pretty little bow. I thought at the time that it was a sealed adoption, and I would go to my deathbed, as would my parents, with this secret.
And to the best of your memory, how fast were you back in school and what was that like?
My recollection is that I was back in school very quickly. I recall my mother saying, Angie, you've only been out of school a short time. If you go back to school in your regular clothes, people may wonder what the heck happened just these last few days. I was just so happy to fit back into my regular clothes, throw those other clothes away and just move on. I also, did not give in to any cravings. I didn't want to put on a whole lot of weight. I wanted to be as small as possible so that I could pass off as being normal, so to speak.
How fast would you say your body recovered?
Very quickly.
Days?
I don't recall specifically, but I remember thinking, okay, really? Like, I don't know what the big deal is about what women say about recovery. But But again, at 17 years old, you bounce back very quickly. I was trying to sort of figure out my new normal and who I was after those 9 months.
And where were you? Who were you?
I was slipping back into what I felt was my old self, but it wasn't my old self. It was a new version of myself that I had created during those 9 months of holding on to this secret and this shame and this burden and building walls around that to save myself, essentially. And those walls and those boundaries just continued to get stronger over the years. That shame and that weight and that weight.
Do you remember a time thinking about it over the years?
There were times something would come up, a song would come on, something would spark a memory, but I was very quick to shut that down and, hey, look, you're not there anymore. It's done. It's over. It's not there. You don't need to think about that. And I had that strength that I had worked towards for all of those months. I had the strength to shut it down.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is I see the secret as your truth. And can you access the real Angie without accessing all of it?
I think I was so busy trying to build up those walls that I was trying to just build a new version of me.
Okay, so in your mind, it wasn't buried. It was like it didn't happen.
I am moving on. Those 9 months of the torture that I inflicted on myself, gone. I don't ever have to think about it again if I don't want to. That was my belief.
And did you find that to be true?
I found that to be the exact opposite of the truth. I was really, as I said, shaped and molded by this experience. I was toughened up. I was forced to grow up very quickly. But on the other hand, I think I almost reverted backwards as well in a way. I always felt like there was something in me, something that I couldn't describe. And over the years, even as my quite adult self, I would have never been able to pinpoint that event as shaping who I am today. But that event, that secret, that fear, that desperation, that intense shame formed every single bit of me.
Would you say the secret gave it life, the shame life? Power?
Yeah. Yes. I think that's what secrets and shame do. They feed each other and fester off of each other. And when you do not get help, any kind of help, I don't care who you are and how strong you think you are, it has detrimental effects on every shred of your being. And I know that now because my secret is out and I know who I was for 35 years and I know who I am now. And I know that shedding that part of me and sharing this part of me is just making me a little bit better.
You have been listening to the podcast Held. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you especially to Gary and Reese and Tracy for adding such important insights to this podcast. And be sure to join us for the next episode where Angie's theory that she would never hear from her biological child again is blown out of the water. Here's a preview.
I said, do I need to sit down? And he said, yes. He said, Angie, I just got a phone call from the wife of your 35-year-old son. He's happy and he's healthy and he has been loved his entire life and he has 2 children.
This is Carrie Offstein Rosenthal. You have been listening to the podcast Held. We hope you'll follow us and tell all your friends about us. See you next time.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or dial 911 in case of an emergency.